Chapter 8. Luke was in the kitchen scraping burned cookies into the garbage disposal when Kat returned home from her date with Dan the following night. Phewie, Catherine waved her hands. That is much a stinky. What are you still doing up? Burning cookies. How was your date? Catherine sat on a bar stool and swung her foot. Fun. The play was terrific. We ate at a fabulous little Italian place off the beaten track called Giovanni's. Do you know it? I was the one who told him about it. You and old Daniel hit it off, huh? He's charming. Just remember, he's been married once before. No problem, as long as he doesn't bring his ex to dinner with us, Catherine said cheerfully. Devil's food cake? Ah, strawberry swirl. This was not going well, she decided several days later. One of the problems was she was rarely home. The other was, well, she was being too subtle. She needed to turn up the heat. They were anchored out on the bay on Nick's 27-foot sailboat. Even at 6 in the evening, the heat of the day was oppressive. She felt like the wicked witch in The Wizard of Oz, melting. There wasn't a breath of wind. The dark blue water reflected mirror smooth. The air shimmered. Dozens of white-sailed boats, manned by scantily clad people hoping for an ocean breeze, cruised the bay. In the distance, the city looked freshly washed and as picture, perfect as a postcard. She could even see the twin towers of their condo beyond Marina Green. Luke lay sprawled face down on a towel on the varnished deck. Nick slouched on a folding deck chair, a book on his chest, eyes closed. Both wore swimsuits and a light film of perspiration on their tanned skins. Catherine, wearing a soft lime green sundress and sitting in the shade, sighed. She pulled the light t-shirt fabric farther up her bare legs. Do you think if I sit in the sun my freckles will join together and I'll get a nice even tan? You've been asking me that same question since you turned 15, Luke told her, and the answer is still no. He reached blindly for the soda beside him. Catherine nudged it closer with her toe. Thanks. Remember when you went to Hawaii that year? You came back parboiled and peeling. How do you know? You weren't there. That was the year he'd gone to the Pratt Institute in New York to study architecture. She'd felt as though a cannonball had gone through her chest and left a gaping, bleeding hole. Worse even than the day her mom had walked out and left her behind. Dad told me about it. Catherine felt her eyes well and bit her lip. She'd had wonderful years with her stepfather. Good years. She had to remember those. But God, how she missed him. Missed the unconditional love he'd always given her. Missed the feel of his arms around her. Missed that safety and the sense of belonging he'd provided. She closed her eyes and said a quick prayer of gratitude for the years they had shared. Hey. Luke curled his fingers around her ankle. His hand was cold from holding the soda can as he absently smoothed his thumb up and down her ankle bone. Dad wouldn't have wanted you to be sad on such a beautiful day. How did you know I was thinking about him? Icy hot shivers sheeted her skin at his touch. Your mouth always goes soft and sort of pouty when you're sad. Come on, Catwoman. Give me a smile. Thankful her sunglasses hid her misty eyes, Catherine felt her heart expand as she looked down at him, lying there like a giant sun-loving lion. Miles of smooth, tanned, naked skin. Sweat-dampened dark hair. Heartbreaking smile. Good memories, she said around the lump in her throat. I know, Luke said softly. Although she couldn't see his eyes behind his glasses, she could feel his gaze skim her face. He let go of her ankle and she felt bereft. It was just one of those quick, sneaky whammies. I'm getting better every day. Isn't that a song? Yes, but please spare us and don't sing it. Here, here, Nick agreed, reminding them he was also on board. The muscles in Luke's back flexed as he pillowed his head on his hands. Man, this is the life. I could get used to it. A seagull squawked as it wheeled lazily overhead. Wavelets lapped the wooden hull. Lines creaked. The boat barely moved. The scent of suntan lotion overrode the salty tang of the water. If she leaned down and stretched out her hand, she could touch Luke's shoulder. Catherine wanted to touch him so badly her fingernails tingled. Her heart sped up and her palms felt slick on her soda can. She imagined sliding her hands up his back, drawing his half-naked body against hers. She imagined Luke blocking out the sun as he angled his head to kiss her, imagined his mouth touching hers, imagined him wanting her. Not like the last disastrous time she'd kissed him, 9 years ago. She'd almost knocked him to the floor in her exuberance. What a naive fool she'd been. Of course he'd been repulsed. Even inebriated, she'd known how appalled Luke had been. After several Keystone Cops moves, Luke had managed to extricate himself from her rubbery hold with a firm, no-nonsense grip of her shoulders. Then he'd yelled at her. Or had she thrown up, and then he'd yelled at her? She shuddered at the memory, but that was then. This was now. Luke wasn't going anywhere. She wasn't feeling cool linoleum under her bare feet, but the solid wood deck. She wasn't a beer-giddy, euphoric 17-year-old. She was stone-cold sober. No time like the present. Her heart did an anticipatory jig in her chest. The can made a little popping sound as she squeezed it too tightly. "Okay, which of you is the best kisser?" she asked into the heat-induced silence. "I am," both men said in unison. Luke lifted his glasses off his nose, opened one eye, and squinted up at her. "Why?" "Because I think I need kissing lessons." "Good idea," Nick said, using a water-filled plastic spray bottle to spritz his legs and chest. He gave Catherine a wink of approval. She kept her expression bland. Bad idea, bad idea. Luke scowled at Nick. "She does not need kissing lessons. Don't encourage her." "Gee, I'm sorry you don't approve." Catherine peered at him over her sunglasses. "But I'm serious here. This is a skill I want to master. I've heard kissing can be taken to a fine art. I've had the sloppy kind, the dry kind, the icky kind, and pretty much everything in between. I want to be taught by the best. So I can even the playing field. Who's it going to be?" She avoided looking directly at Luke while she spoke, lest she chicken out. "We'll both teach you, Catherine," Nick said. "You'll have the advantage of learning from two masters." "Forget it." Luke sat up. He had the imprint of the towel on his sweat-sheened chest. "Women are born knowing how to seduce. We should be teaching her what to expect and how to resist. Martial arts. That's what we should be teaching her, for heaven's sake. Besides, Kat's not having two men stick their tongues down her throat one after the other. That's gross." "Oh, thank you for sparing me that. Sticking your tongue down my throat? If that's how you two turkeys exhibit finesse, I'd rather kiss a frog. No frogs in salt water." Nick reached for his shorts lying on the deck under his chair. "If you learn from a master, you won't waste your time kissing a bunch of horny toads. Hey, old son, I'll flip you for it." He took a coin out of a pocket. Luke looked horrified. "You can't flip a coin for something as intimate as a kiss." "Sure we can. Remember Jennifer?" That was different. As knowing the coin Nick held was double-sided, Catherine hid a smile. "Oh, just ignore him and flip it," she instructed Nick. She shot Luke a glance. "If I don't mind, why should you?" "Call." Nick prepared to flip. "Forget it." Luke scowled. "Neither of us is teaching Kat anything. When the right man comes along, he'll do all the teaching she wants. Until then, keep your grubby lips to yourself, Stratton." "Catherine?" Nick asked. She shrugged. "If Luke doesn't want to help, then I'd welcome any pointers you can give me." "Thanks, Nick." Nick gave her a sexy, dimpled smile and held out his hand. "Stand up, sweetheart, and let's see what I can do." "Stay right where you are, Kat." "Don't be such a grouch." Catherine rose, stepped over him, and took Nick's hand. "Okay, how should we do this?" "Put your mouth anywhere near hers and you'll be fish bait." Luke jerked upright. "And take your hand off her butt." Catherine struggled to keep a straight face. She couldn't even look at Nick as he carefully lifted his hand from the small of her back. "One of us is going to help Catherine out, old son." Nick tugged her against his side. "Why don't you go below for an hour or so? I don't want an audience." "Do you, Catherine?" "Don't overdo it, Nick." "Not particularly. No." Luke ignored her to glare at his friend. "An hour? She wants a kissing lesson, not a detailed roadmap through the Kama Sutra." Nick pulled her closer. "Anything worth doing is worth doing well." "No." "Hey, you had a chance to call it. Either of us would do, right, Catherine?" "Heads," Luke snapped. "Damn, I was really looking forward to—" "Flip the damn coin." Nick grinned, slid Kat a wink, and flipped the coin. It caught the sunset as it spun head over head and onto the back of his hand. He slapped his palm down, then lifted it to look. "Heads it is. Should I close my eyes, or would you prefer I go below and take my time finding something cold to drink? How about swimming back to the marina via Alaska?" "Luke," Nick laughed. "Man, you're a sore winner. I'm off to find some compelling reason to stay below." He quirked an eyebrow at Luke. "Unless you want me to stay and coach from the sidelines?" I certainly don't need coaching, but there's no need to make yourself scarce. This'll only take a minute. A minute? Nick gave her a sympathetic look. Poor Catherine, being instructed by someone with such a limited repertoire. For a man who couldn't even dredge up a date for tonight, you're a fine one to talk, Luke told him sourly. I had a date tonight, old son. There she is, about to be mashed by my best friend. Go figure how I ended up being the third wheel. I'm damned if I do and damned if I don't, Luke thought as Nick went below. Luke dragged on heavy jean shorts over his thin swimsuit, the closest thing to body armor he could come up with at such short notice. He shifted his stance so he could pull up the zipper. What on earth are you doing? Kat asked as she flopped into a chair. You're going to roast alive in those hot things. True. On the other hand, he was already on high boil just looking at her and imagining his lips on her mouth. I don't want to get you overexcited. Stand up. Kat grinned. She rose from the chair and reached up to hold onto the rigging to keep her balance. It was a centerfold stance, with one slender arm curved over her head, the other at her side. The soft fabric of her dress molded nicely to the gentle swell of her breasts and clung to her hips and long legs. Overexcited by a little kiss. Oh, please, get real. Fighting words. A challenge, if he ever heard one. Unfortunately, this was one he'd prefer not to accept. Kiss Kat, touch his mouth to hers, feel her breath. Man, this was a bad idea. Bad idea. Look what had happened the last time. He had to refuse. The words hovered like something bitter on the tip of his tongue. Just say no, he told himself. But he saw the tantalizing sparkle in her amber eyes, the joyous lift of her lips, the knowledge he read in her face, that no matter what she asked of him, he'd come through for her. Dissolved his resistance. He was doomed. How do you feel? He asked cautiously. Her eyes opened wide. Just fine. Why? Tummy okay? Their eyes met as they both remembered that night. Her chin came up, her amber eyes dared him. I'm feeling in the pink of good health. Smooch away. Accustomed to the gentle pitch of the boat, he strolled over to stand in front of her, then gave her a reproving look. You have to concentrate here, Kat. There are kisses, and then there are kisses. I'll show you how it's supposed to be done. But you have to close your eyes and focus on the subtle nuances. Which would be a nice change from the last time he'd mangled her lips in a fit of misplaced passion. Tiger eyes alight with mirth, Kat looked up at him. Subtle nuances? You? Remove your hat and glasses, please, he instructed sternly. He could make this a quick tutorial. He didn't have to get involved. It was just a kiss. 2 sets of lips touching briefly. Nothing to it. Kat dutifully pulled off the baseball cap she'd been wearing and tossed it down the companionway. Freed from the confines of the hat, her hair went berserk. An explosion of shiny Titian red curls demanded to be crushed beneath his fingers. Luke kept his marauding fingers and itchy palms at his sides. She removed her sunglasses and glanced around for somewhere safe to put them. He plucked them from her, whipped off his own shades, and set both on the chair she'd just vacated. He straightened and scrutinized her face. The anticipation was going to kill him. But now, when he suddenly had the opportunity to show her, whatever it was he wanted to show her, he was scared spitless. He saw in her eyes the memory of another kiss, another challenge. But the only miserable consolation about that disastrous night had been Kat's claim to have only vague memories about what had happened. Thank God. He didn't want those memories to taint this, which was just a simple kiss. He was delusional. This wasn't just a kiss. He knew that. His body knew that. He just didn't want Kat to know it. He felt the thud of his heart deep in his chest, felt the tightening of his jeans, felt a rush of desire so strong, so profound he simply stood there, riding the gentle buck of the waves, and looked down at her. How long are you going to stand there staring at me? She demanded, chin out, eyes bright. She narrowed those witchy eyes, and Luke knew he was on a slippery slope wearing wet, leather-soled shoes. In a hurry? Well, no. He reached up and anchored her fingers on the rigging with his own. His hand covered hers completely. Slowly, he slid his right hand under her hair to cup the back of her damp neck. The filaments clung to his hand and arm like living flame. A pulse throbbed a jungle beat in his ears. The universe around them bled into soft focus, leaving Kat in sharp relief before him. Beautiful Kat. His Kat. He was going to have to make this a lasting memory. "You have to take a breath," he reminded her, noticing she'd stopped inhaling completely when he touched her. Her breasts brushed his chest as she drew in a shaky breath. Right. Her green dress wasn't particularly low-cut. Luke could just see the freckled swell of her breasts above the fabric. But the thought of that soft material hiding her luscious breasts almost had him in cardiac arrest. She took another shuddery breath, and he caught a glimpse of shiny lime green silk, that teddy thing she'd bought the other day. Slick green silk over bare skin, that thong riding between her legs. His fingers tightened imperceptibly on her nape. She tilted her face. He lowered his head and touched his mouth to the pulse at her temple, and felt her slight start of surprise as he feathered his lips on the unsteady flutter he discovered there. He made soothing noises as his lips traveled across her cheek, discovered the taste of her skin, gauged her response to the lightest of touches. He ran the tip of his tongue experimentally across the eyelashes on her left eye. She murmured under her breath. He duplicated the action on her other lid. Her breath huffed out against his throat. Luke shuddered as her hand crept around his waist. He removed it and patted it to her side, then lifted his mouth a fraction. "That's lesson number... later. Hold your horses, woman." He went back to her eyelids. Oh yeah, more than, Her skin felt incredibly soft and smooth under his exploring mouth. He imagined the heady taste of cinnamon as his lips skimmed across her hot cheek, the end of her nose, the other cheek. Kat's fingers flexed restlessly under his on the ropes. Her breasts brushed lightly against his bare chest as she started to lean into him again. He shifted out of reach, dry tinder eluding the gasoline-drenched torch. "Nuh-uh," he teased, already as hard as the mast. His lips brushed the corner of her mouth. She made a strangled, yearning sound low in her throat. Luke resisted the primitive urge to crush her beneath him and take her right there beneath the sunny sky out on deck. Cool your jets. He didn't want to scare her away. Not now. Not when he was so close to heaven. They touched in only 3 places, their fingers gripping the rigging, his hand on her nape, and the butterfly-like touch of his mouth on hers. Yet his entire body seemed sensitized by her close proximity. Her breath smelled of the Dr. Pepper she'd been drinking. Sweet, spicy, cat. Cat. Just what the doctor ordered. Too bad he was on a restricted diet. Luke angled his head slightly and nipped her lower lip with his teeth. She nibbled back. He laved the bites with his tongue. She licked his lip like a frustrated, hungry cat. He brushed his mouth back and forth over hers. She hummed and parted her lips. Luke settled his mouth on hers. Her lips responded automatically, melding with his, anticipating the shift and slide of his tongue. He was inside. The scented flavor of her mouth tasted achingly familiar. Luke had imagined this for so long, it felt like coming home. He shuddered as desire, hot, strong, and pounding, surged through his body like a drug. He felt dizzy with it, high, ridiculously, disproportionately happy from one tame little kiss. But it wasn't tame. It was hot, wild, surging, teeth, tongues, lips, melding together in a mind-blowing kiss hot enough to evaporate the water of the bay. Break, break, break. Luke lifted his head and broke contact. That should do it. She looked up at him, eyes dazed, lips damp, cheeks pink. Not bad. She seemed to shake herself out of a fog as she stumbled back a step. I wonder how Nick does it. It was the night after the kiss. Catherine snuggled back into the squishy cushions on Nick's sofa, ignoring the movie they were watching. She closed her eyes, picturing Luke's face after the kiss. Annoyance? Shock at her brazenness? His expression had been impossible to read. 24 hours later, she still felt the jolt that kiss had given her heart. She wished she could bottle the sensation and take it out in the dark of night to hug close. She'd never felt such a weird mixture of peace and agitation in her life. It was exactly as if she had come home. As if she had stood outside, shivering in the snow, looking into the window at everything she'd ever wanted in her life. It was all right there at her fingertips. All she had to do was reach out and grab it. Unfortunately, he'd suddenly remembered he had a date. They'd sped back to the marina, Nick cranky, because Luke insisted he use the motor instead of the sail. Luke had rushed into the condo, showered, changed, and raced out as if the hounds of hell were nipping at his heels. Catherine had lied and told him she had a date, too. Then spent several boring hours sitting through a subtitled German movie staring at the back of some Luke lookalike's head before dragging herself home. Despite a restless, sleepless night, she hadn't heard his return. But this morning when she'd left to go out for a while, he was sound asleep on the sofa. Catherine touched her lips. How odd that they felt, and looked just the same. When Luke had touched his mouth to hers last night, something inside her had shifted and stirred. Changed. She'd literally felt like Sleeping Beauty awakening from a deep sleep, and she realized she hadn't known what love was until now. She'd been so blinded by the sheer sexy maleness of Lucas Van Buren that she hadn't noticed herself tumbling headlong into a forever kind of love. She'd made an eyes-wide-open decision to give herself one last chance at seeing if what she felt could possibly be reciprocated. But she was aerialist. Luke wasn't ever going to settle down. What if she got what she wanted? Could she walk away when it was over? Be careful what you wish for. You might get it. Yes. Because the alternative was never knowing, always aching, spending the rest of her life empty and unfulfilled. Something with Luke was better than everything with somebody else. And when it was inevitably over, she'd have the memory of Luke's heat to keep her warm. Catherine hugged a cushion. Insecurity squeezed her chest. Luke had sure been in one big old hurry to get away from her last night. It had been more subtle than 9 years ago, only because he had more finesse now. Was she doing irreparable damage to what she already had with him? Perhaps she should leave well enough alone. Luke cared for her. She knew he did. Maybe that should be enough. If she got too greedy, she took the chance of losing it all. "Hey, Nick." With a grin, Nick pointed the remote control at the TV and the sound went off. "Wanna analyze the kiss?" She squeezed the cushion to her aching middle. "Let's." "Scared?" "Spitless," Catherine admitted. "He sped out of there last night like his hair was on fire. How was he at work today?" Like his hair was on fire. Nick's dimples showed. Easy for him to be amused. "You were priceless yesterday, honey. Trust me, the fish might be struggling on the hook, but you just have to be strong enough to hang on to that line. I'm terrified. I don't want to force him. I want him to love you as much as you love him." He gave her a sympathetic look. "Luke's a hard nut. You know that. He's got this protective instinct a mile wide. The last thing I want is for him to feel obligation. Catherine, he can't help feeling some obligation to take care of you. He's pretty much your only family. It's not in Luke's nature to turn his back." Her frown turned to a scowl, and her heart felt like a heavy rock in her chest. "Are you telling me Luke is humoring me because of some asinine sense of responsibility?" "No. I'm telling you Luke thinks he's humoring you because he feels responsible for you." "Huh? Isn't that the same thing?" "No, it isn't." Nick picked up a cold slice of pizza out of the box beside him. "Luke wants you, Catherine. Trust me on this. I know my pal. He's about to shed his skin. He wants you so bad. He's resisting the pull with every particle of his willpower. And as we both know, Luke has awesome willpower. Remember when he gave up smoking? Cold turkey. And when we bet we wouldn't drink beer for a month? It was on our first college break. I caved in 2 weeks. Despite winning, Luke stuck it out the exact 30 days. If he wants me, Catherine said, completely frustrated, why doesn't he just have me? Why resist? What's the point? I'm here. I'm available. I want him. Damn it, Nick, why? Have you noticed what type of woman our friend dates? Sure, Catherine said miserably. Petite blondes, miniature brunettes, boobs out to here, and of course all of them are sexy and beautiful. Why do men always have to go for a type anyway? Other than the sexy and beautiful part, which you are, have you ever noticed how much his type doesn't resemble you? Catherine sank her chin into the cushion she was clutching. Oh, great! Thanks for pointing that out. He'll date anyone as long as she doesn't resemble you. Interesting, huh? That isn't an answer, and I think this conversation just took a useless U-turn. I'm just reminding you of Luke Van Buren's amazing self-control and willpower, which he has to spare, not to mention he's as stubborn as a mule. It's taking him longer than I thought to separate the woman from the kid. Personally, I've always thought he dated the many to keep him safe from the one. Before he could explain what that meant, he was interrupted by a loud banging at the front door. Nick glanced up and grinned. Speak of the devil,